It's okay. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting in a while again. There is some connectivity problem. There's some connectivity problem, uh, but I hope it will work now. Okay, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there was some connectivity issue. Now we are starting again. Yes. Now we discuss the mandate and functions. It has returned back to slide 1. Let me move to number is it, by the way? 92. Yes, mandate and functions of electoral management bodies. So, an electoral management body has to manage a very complex nationwide task. You know, election, it is a very complex task, and it is a very broad task. Even small technical failures can harm its image of being competent and professional, even if it makes small mistakes. So people will say it is incompetent election commission, it is not professional. And at worst, such failures can create doubts and accusations of election manipulation. So it is the worst case scenario that when there are accusations that the election commission has manipulated the elections, it has changed the results like that. An electoral management body in transition should have the authority to work independently and effectively. It must also have enough skills, staff, and resources to run elections successfully. So the election commissions, they should have enough resources, they should have enough staff, and they should have enough skills to conduct good elections. So you can get closer if you like. You can bring your chairs here. So electoral management bodies have some main functions. The main functions, what are the main functions of electoral management bodies? They decide who can vote. So they prepare the voter lists and they receive and check candidate nominations. People submit their nomination papers with the election commission, electoral management bodies. And the electoral management bodies, they conduct the elections, they conduct the polls, they count and add up the votes. Vote counting is also done by the election commission, electoral management bodies. And EMBs may also do other related tasks. These include voter registration. Voter registration is also mainly done by electoral management bodies. Boundary setting, constituencies, deciding the constituencies for the assemblies, for the National Assembly, for the provincial assemblies, and even for the local assemblies, local councils. And voter education, educating the voters how to vote and who to vote and why to vote, all these things. And giving information, all necessary information which has to be provided to the voters. It is done by the electoral management bodies. Media monitoring and resolving election disputes. So after the election, there are many disputes. Okay, there are complaints and cases. The people, the candidates who lose their seats, they file complaints with the election commission, and those complaints have to be decided. They are like lawsuits. And the level of electoral management bodies' control and independence in these tasks can be different. For example, if the voter list comes from another ministry's civil registry, the EMB does not need to do much. So preparing the register of voters, the list of voting list, it is a big task. Okay, registering each and every voter at the national level, it is a big task. And if this task is done by another ministry, another governmental department, then the election commission job gets easier. But if the voter list is being revised or created new, the electoral management body has to do more. The EMB should always have the resource and power to check the quality of the voter list. Now, preparing the voter list, it is a very technical issue, and it can be maneuvered. It can be maneuvered to get particular results, planned results. For example, a government can do that certain people or communities, they are not included in the voter list, so that the opponent parties don't get the required number of votes. So at each and every level of the electoral process, things can be maneuvered. So the electoral management bodies, they have a great responsibility to look into these matters. It should also have a clear mandate to approve the list for use in an election. Sometimes the public and private systems are not strong enough for an EMB to do all its tasks. For example, in Indonesia, the regime could not control political funding, okay? When other people fund certain individuals, certain candidates, or certain parties. So the electoral management body of Indonesia, it tried to stop the funding, but it could not stop. So it is a challenge. Even when it had strong powers, having rules for political financing is important, but it is not always possible to enforce them. Okay, laws can be made that there will be no political funding, but to enforce these laws is very challenging. And EMB should not be forced to apply rules that it cannot enforce. So EMBs, they have some limitations. So they should not be forced to apply the rules which it cannot enforce, which are beyond its powers. This will only harm its credibility. Some tasks may be given to the EMB, but it should have enough power and resources to decide how to do them. An EMB in transition should also have the authority to make and enforce regulations for its main functions. An EMB in transition should also have the authority to make and enforce regulations for its main functions. Voter education and information are usually part of an EMB's work. So usually electoral management bodies, they do voter education and they provide information to the voters. They are very important for strengthening democracy. These two basic functions of EMBs are important for strengthening democracy. The legal framework should give EMBs the power to do voter education. So we are discussing the legal framework in order to make the EMBs effective. But this job should not be left only to EMBs. The following can also help. There are other institutions, democratic institutions, political institutions, which can help in educating the voters. They are the political parties, they are the civil society groups, companies, government offices, schools, and the media. All these stakeholders can take part in educating the voters. And this support makes sure voters get the information they need to make informed choices. EMBs can also share or hand over this role to other groups, including CSOs. CSOs means civil society organizations. Civil society organizations usually refer to NGOs, but apart from NGOs, they also refer to unions and associations like chambers, labor unions, trade unions. They are all called collectively civil society organizations, CSOs. So the electoral management bodies can deliberate some of the can give some of their functions to these civil society organizations. Delegate is the proper word, not delegate, not deliberate. It is delegation of powers. So, for example, in Ghana, there is a special commission separate from the electoral management body that does civic education and voter education. That does civic education and voter education. The EMB must be able to manage its budget independently. Delayed funding or conditional funding can damage the fairness of elections. So the electoral management bodies should have enough funding and they should get the funding in time. Like other public institutions, the EMB must follow financial integrity rules. Financial integrity rules. So in 10 minutes we close. We conclude. But its funding should be safe from political control or manipulation. Funding of the election commissions should be free from political control and free from manipulation. The EMB should have two separate budgets. One for its functioning, is for its salaries, for its buildings, for paying the bills, and the other for its particular tasks. For example, if an election is coming, it should have a separate budget for holding the elections. So it should have two separate types of budgets. So an MB is judged by how well it creates a fair and equal ground for all political parties. It is called level playing field. The election commission, the electoral management bodies, they are supposed to provide level playing field to all stakeholders, to all political contestants, to all political parties, so that there is no discrimination. If elections favor the ruling party, it harms fairness and the EMB's credibility. Countries in transition may not fully understand the idea of a level playing field. So, many countries, many societies which do not have sufficient democratic experience, they may not understand the concept. They may not have proper understanding of the concept of level playing field. They may follow the old habit of letting governments use public resources and media for campaigns. In Indonesia, election laws during transition tried to make things fair. Make things fair. They limited media ads, they gave equal campaign time to all contestants, and they banned use of public resources for campaigns. So sometimes governments used public resources, official cars, for example, official fuel, okay, official time for their political campaigns. So it is a sort of corruption. So it is not fair because the new contestants or the contestants who belong to opposition parties, they do not have access to official resources. In Bangladesh and India, EMBs made a code of conduct. This code stops government ministers from using public resources during elections. This code of conduct in Bangladesh and India stops government ministers from using public resources during elections. Every country is unique and every transition is unique. There cannot be one standard model for the powers of the electoral management bodies. There can be no single model for all countries. The right mix of powers should depend on the country's history. It should also depend on current transition, and it should also depend on technical needs. The best mix is not always about giving more powers. Sometimes independence is stronger when certain powers are removed. This point is very interesting. This point is very interesting. Sometimes, if the election commission has more power, it helps. But sometimes, when certain powers are removed, taken away from it, it also helps. How does it help? It is also explained here. For example, central banks became stronger when they lost the power of deficit spending. When they lost the central banks lost the power of deficit spending, so they became stable, more stable, because now they have to manage their finances better. If they are allowed to go for deficit spending, they will not control the spending, and there will be more fiscal irresponsibility and fiscal instability. Similarly, if when some of the powers may be taken away from the electoral management bodies, it might help in bringing responsibility, and it may also help them shunning the pressures. Okay, they can easily say, okay, it is beyond our authority. We cannot do this. Simple. So, broad consultation with local stakeholders is very important. Broad consultations. This builds national ownership of the electoral management body's role. Learning from other countries' experiences can help avoid common mistakes. The election laws should also allow electoral management bodies to join international electoral activities when elections are held out of the country in some other parts of the world. So the electoral management bodies should also be able to learn from them, to interact with them. Handling complaints shows that sometimes removing some powers protects from outside pressure. Removing some powers. It also helps. when the election commissions deal with the election campaigns, complaints. And EMB is often asked to deal with complaints about how elections are managed. Ghana is one example of this. A smart method separates complaints about election management from complaints about election results. So these are two things. There are two types of complaints. One type of complaints is about the election management, how elections were held. The other type of complaint is about the election results. What was the result of the election? So this creates a two-step system that reduces pressure on the electoral management body. But Ghana also shows a warning. Ghana. Normal courts are often too slow for the fast speed of elections. Normal courts, they take months and years to decide one case, certain cases. So in that sense, normal courts are slow. Elections go on a faster pace, so a faster mechanism to decide the matters is required. So the authors are pointing to Ghana, where the normal courts, in fact, could not meet the challenge. So if courts handle election complaints, there should be a special tribunal. There should be special tribunal to decide the electoral complaints if normal courts are dealing with them. This tribunal should have clear rules, and this tribunal should work within election timeline. Okay, Ji. I think we can stop here. The next subheading is membership and staffing. So we can discuss it the next week? Yes. So next week we will conclude this topic, this reading. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with me.